Hello and welcome to another episode of TOTs. I'm your host, Ben Gardner. Today on the show, we have my former soccer coach. He's a very famous soccer coach, former FBI Special Agent Joe Bradley, and current person who works at an IT company. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see you. Yeah. We were talking a little bit. I think the last time I saw you, I was holding some snake in a shopping mall area. And then the time before that, I was selling you knives. So it's good to like catch up like just as people and not like a salesperson or like a crazy animal guy.
No, but the snakes were very cool.
Oh, they are very cool. Yeah. I love working with those things because it's exactly what people are not expecting. And being in that area, it's nice too because you have like weird wild animals and it's just people walking around like going to the AT&T store or like going to buy groceries and they're like, oh, like an 8-foot snake. That's cool.
Yeah. The kids thought you were very cool. Talked about you for weeks after that.
That's good. So. You have very nice kids. I like your kids.
Thank you. I am blessed.
Yeah, for sure. Little background. I was good friends with your son. Still, I mean, we're still friends. I just don't see him anymore. But I've known you for a very long time. It was very cool to have one of my best friends' dads as a soccer coach and FBI agent like at the same time. I thought that was very interesting, and I'm excited to have you on to talk.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and Joe is currently overseas and due to come back he's a lieutenant in the Army, and he's set to come back actually next week. That's awesome. He's been overseas for the last 7-8 months.
Oh wow! I didn't even know he was like deployed. What was he? What was he doing?
Supporting special forces in one of the sandy countries.
One of the sandy ones. Yeah. There's a lot of those.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's a great kid and obviously, very cool to be friends with him too. And I'm excited to have you on. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your career in the FBI. I saw from your LinkedIn, which I stalked thoroughly before this interview, you first started at the NSA and then moved to the FBI. So what was that like starting at the NSA and then why did you eventually end up moving to the FBI?
Well, graduating college, my goal was to go to the FBI, and at the time you had to have 3 years work experience. So I set out with as an agent with NSA, and shortly thereafter there was a hiring freeze with the FBI. So my 3 to 4 years became 8 years when the hiring freeze was lifted, tested again, and I was fortunate enough to get into the FBI in February of 1995.
Wow.
Now, you weren't even alive then, so
no, I was not. Yeah, I came a few years after that. Why the FBI specifically? What drew you to them initially?
The FBI is the premier law enforcement agency in the country. It's one of those things to go to shoot for the best that you possibly can, and that's what I was doing. I mean, again, no offense towards any other agencies. Everybody has their charters, and they're good in their challenges. For me, I set my sights on the FBI very early on, and then tried my best to live my life through college and beyond, with that goal in mind.
Yeah, and that's tough, especially because the FBI has pretty strict rules about joining. So I've heard, the whole polygraph test, and
they do. The polygraph is a challenge for a lot of folks. But again, I am currently a polygraph examiner also.
Okay.
That's
what you brought here today. We're going to do a polygraph test.
Absolutely. We'll connect you and we'll ask some questions of you. No, but it's the polygraph is a challenge for a lot of folks. But again, it's very easy. I can tell you how to pass the polygraph. It's very, very easy.
What do you do to pass the polygraph?
Tell the truth.
Okay, I thought you were going to give me some inside knowledge on.
Nope, it's that. But again, it is that easy. Tell the truth.
You just have to tell the truth.
It really is that easy.
I've also heard even if you've done something wrong that you're not supposed to have done prior to joining an organization where you need a certain clearance, that it's also just a good idea just to tell the truth, even if it's like a bad thing.
It absolutely. You're 100% correct. The Bureau doesn't hire perfect people because they don't exist. The Bureau hires honest people. And again, it's one of those things that your honesty is what is being questioned.
Right.
And through that, past behavior will determine future behavior.
Sure.
So again, being honest in the past, chances are you're probably going to be honest in the future too.
Right. But like, let's say like I have a problem telling the truth. Like, what's like the best way to get around a polygraph?
There is no way to get
There's
around.
no way.
No. I mean, a lot of people will attempt countermeasures, and that's a surefire way to get you tossed out. Because the examiner, even if the examiner doesn't catch the countermeasure, he's going to see that the charts are not normal. There are anomalies. The examiner will pick up on the anomalies and will question you as to why you're having anomalies to simple questions. So you're not going to get around. You're not going to beat the test. You may beat the examiner. You're not going to beat the test. So the bottom line is just tell the truth. It's easy.
Damn.
And 99.9% of what is personal to you and would be a challenge to you is of no concern to the Bureau or any other law enforcement agency. They just care that you're honest.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, well, I have to come clean. I only invited you here to get inside knowledge on how to take a polygraph because I have to do one of those next week. And so that, I guess we haven't really gotten anywhere. So I guess we can just end the podcast there.
All right, we're done.
Yeah. See you guys. All right. So in terms of these questions, from what you're allowed to share, what are some things that the Bureau might ask that would trip people up?
They're questions simply about your honesty and integrity. Your involvement in crime, drugs. Are you a spy? Are you a terrorist? Are you a security risk? To the federal government. Are you honest? Are you filling out your forms correctly? Are you lying about anything on your forms? So again, they're all very easy questions. All the questions are reviewed with the person ahead of time. And so there's no trick questions, no surprise questions. You'll know all the questions and all the answers before you ever take the test. So I don't know about you, but I could have done a lot better in school if I knew all that.
Yeah, I didn't know that part. See, that's a really cool detail.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So like, what would you do if you got to the polygraph and you were interviewing somebody and you get to like a question around like, are you a spy? Do you work for a foreign government? And they just like flat out was like, Yep, you guys got me. I know honesty is the best policy. I really want to work here. I'm a spy for the Chinese government. Like, what has that ever happened? What would you do in that situation?
Hypothetically, it could happen.
Okay.
And at that point, if somebody admits something, then that's when the conversation begins. It's all a conversation. It's like a conversation that we're having here now.
Is this a polygraph right now?
Let's connect.
Let's get it all. We have plenty of wires and everything.
One of the things that I do as a side business is the ethical polygraph preparation. So it's a class.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a class that myself and another gentleman will prepare, and like you study for the SATs or the LSATs or any other test. You do prep beforehand.
Right.
So why not do it? Why not do it for polygraph?
Especially when they're going to give you the answers.
You're not giving away the goods. You're not telling anybody any questions, any specific questions, but you're providing a background and you're preparing somebody to take the test. You're not helping them pass the test. You're helping them prepare for the test. The same way that you would for the LSAT. There's absolutely no countermeasures that will ever be discussed. Again, if you look up on the internet now, probably the first 12, 13 sites are all about how to beat the test. What we're advocating is not how to beat the test; it's just how to prepare, for the test.
Interesting.
Simply, if you're on medication, take your medication, get a good night's sleep. All basic things that the examiner will go over with you when you take your test. But if you heard all that stuff ahead of time, you'd be able to prepare ahead of time.
Right.
Again, it's the ethical polygraph preparation. There's no nothing nefarious and not giving away anything that would hurt anybody.
Right. I find this stuff really interesting because I feel like there's a lot of like weird situations around polygraph tests. So like it's still not admissible in court, but it's still something that's used like widely enough. So like what is the importance on doing something like this if it gets you to a certain level, but it's not enough to be used in like a court of law?
The actual results may not be admissible in a court of law, but the actual admissions and confessions are.
Interesting.
So I mean, you may not hear that a polygraph was ever administered, but you would hear about a confession that was obtained
through somebody doing a polygraph.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
So again, you never hear polygraph, but you may hear of the results of one. If somebody confessed, somebody took a test, they failed the test, and as a result of the conversation that we're having, they admitted to a crime, they confessed to a crime, and that admission, that confession, that would be admissible, but at no point would you ever hear polygraph.
Okay, hence the ethical preparation. Because what I can see is a situation where somebody obviously like did something, they go into that, and then they fail the test, and they think, okay, they know, might as well talk about it, and then it's, they're done.
Yep. I mean, establishing a relationship, whether that's in law enforcement, whether that's in sales, marketing, discussions with friends and relatives, establishing relationships. That's what it's all about, and providing a reason for someone to talk with you. Everybody has something that makes them tick. You just need to figure out what that is.
Yeah. See, that sounded really cool. That was like a very like bureau thing to say. I like that.
Again, that's just my life. Whether it's normal or abnormal to somebody else. In what I do now, it has nothing to do with law enforcement. But it's establishing those relationships in furthering the business.
Sure. Yeah, I was in a class this past week with Chris Voss, the you know who he is, right? Yeah. So he said like a lot of very similar things about negotiations in terms of like you need to understand where they're coming from. They need to feel like you're listening to them, and there's like different tips and tricks. But like what I think is interesting, if you break down what you were saying and what he's saying, it's all about how you are interacting with another person. That relationship that you create with them does everything.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're giving the reason in sales. You're giving them a reason to buy.
Right.
In law enforcement, you're giving them a reason to tell you something that is against their best interest, and then thank you for it afterwards.
Have you done that?
All the time.
How do you get to a level where you get somebody to trust you like that?
Talking to them, establishing that relationship. You have however many hours it takes to establish that relationship. To figure out, as I mentioned, what means something to them. Everybody has something that means something to them, and you talk to them about it. You have in law enforcement, you have an outcome that you're seeking, the truth.
Right.
You don't go in there with a bias. You go in there seeking the truth. And there are cases where you go into a polygraph, for instance, and the case agent may believe, hey, this is our guy. And then after the polygraph, they end up passing, and it's not your guy. But now you've blown this case agent's case,
right?
In their opinion. But what you've really done is you focus the investigation, because you can move away from the person who is not involved and then focus it somewhere else. So you're narrowing the investigation down. You're not hurting.
Seeking the truth.
Exactly. And that's what it should be in everybody's mind is seeking the truth. You're not seeking an outcome. You're seeking the truth.
I think it's cool too because, and this is like a very childish way of looking at it, but that's how I like to look at things. If you are administering a polygraph on somebody that's going, and that person is under review or investigation by the Bureau or law enforcement abroad, you kind of get to understand how the case is probably going to go, if I'm not mistaken. If you give somebody a polygraph test and you're like, all right, did you kill Ben? And then they fail the polygraph test, but they don't admit to it, you're still like, okay, but they failed the polygraph test. And even though that's not admissible, you kind of know yourself, you're like, okay, probably they did it, right? Does that ever get frustrating in that line of work where you know somebody basically did something, but they won't confess to it?
Is it frustrating? It can be. But any investigation, you're putting pieces of the puzzle together. Even if somebody may not have confessed or admitted anything to you, and they failed the test, what they've done is they provided another data point. So again, just because they failed it, there may be different reasons for them failing it, other than they committed the crime.
Right.
However, it's another data point.
Interesting.
So it's not the be all and end all. The polygraph is an investigative tool, and if you use it as such, it can point you in the right direction. So I wouldn't call it frustrating. It's just another tool that you've used. You like you in woodworking, if you used any other tool. There are 10 different tools in order to carve this figurine. The hammer doesn't always work.
Sure. So, yeah, I like hammers, and I have very little patience. So this sounds like my personal nightmare is like figuring out the data points, right, and piecing together the story, and then it's like it's probably going this way, but you don't know for sure, and you don't get a confession. That would be very frustrating for me. But I think it comes from a perspective of I don't have good patience. I'm the hammer. Every problem is a nail. I'm like, all right, we can solve this right now. They just failed. It's over, right? That would be my whole take on that.
Yeah, but that's why you have so many different people.
Right.
What your forte is not mine, and it might be vice versa. So we work together. So we work off each other. What I'm not good at, God bless you. That's why you're here. And you that's why you have a team of people, regardless of whether it's sports or whether it's law enforcement or marketing. Everybody brings something to the table. Everybody.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And in terms of the polygraph, again, we have the applicant, where it's used as a tool. It's a screening tool that the government uses for someone to get a job. It may not be the best tool, but it's a tool we have. So again, that's why I go back to that ethical polygraph preparation, so that give people a fair shot, it's a fair process. So that the person going into it, they know what to expect. So everybody says, "Well, I'm nervous. I didn't pass because because I was nervous." People do not pass. They don't fail because they're nervous. They fail because they're not telling entirely the truth.
Yeah, that was going to be my other question. Like, what if you have somebody that's super nervous that would set it off? Like, we've all seen the clips on TV where it's like, the thing is scribbling furiously, and it's like, oh, they're lying. No, they're just super nervous. Yeah. But what you're saying is that the indicators that are picked up and the data sources that feed into the polygraph test would be able to basically tell the difference between general nervousness and anxiety, and they're probably lying.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you're asking the question more than one time, you're asking the question several times. So if I asked you, did you rob the bank? And every time I ask the question, did you rob the bank? There is a large reaction. Well, now we stop the test and we start to talk about robbing the bank. Okay.
Right.
It may be that you were a teller at a bank that was robbed. And that's why you're reacting to this question, that you didn't talk about it ahead of time because you were embarrassed to talk about it. And that's a good reason for a reaction.
Right.
Or you robbed the bank. Yeah. Either way, we're going to talk about it.
Either way, we're going to get to the bottom of it.
We're going to talk about it. Again, you could change the question, you could reword the question, and run several other charts.
Sure.
Again, focus that investigation. It's an investigative tool.
Yeah. My thing with the polygraph too has always been, you were telling me earlier, like the best way to pass is just to tell the truth. So I've also seen that the best way to pass it is to believe the lie. Is that something that you think humans are capable of doing, is like creating their own version of what happened and then not allowing any other thoughts of possibilities except for their lie and then passing a polygraph? Is that a thing you can do?
Would it be possible? It would be possible. Would
Okay.
it be probable? No. Again, that's where the discussion ahead of time would come in, where you're discussing each one of the questions in great detail. You're telling them everything that it's not. He's like, well,
Right.
I'm only focused on this one bank on this one day in this one location.
Oh, damn, you guys get
That's
really
it.
specific. Yeah, see, that's where I would screw up, because I'd be like, no, man, you didn't rob the bank. You freed the money out of there. And then you guys
liberated
get
it.
specific, and I'd lose it all.
Yeah, it's again, we're talking about beating the examiner, not beating the test. I mean, so you have to be in your question formulation, you're establishing so there's no ambiguity, and you're getting the person to buy in to that particular question. So if I'm asking you, did you rob the bank on November 30th? And you think, okay, yes, we've narrowed it down, and you're good with it, and that's the question that I'm asking. And then every time I ask the question and you react to that question, then we talk and figure out why. So that's it. The questions are specific, and you talk about being able, if you believe the lie. There's a saying, if you believe a lie, then it's not a lie.
Right.
Again, theoretical, but one of the premises behind the polygraph is, poly means many and graph is pictures, many pictures. So you have the picture, in your mind of you robbing the bank. And I keep on using the bank robbery aspect. You didn't rob a bank, as far as I know.
Well,
as far as I know.
I haven't seen you in a while.
True. But you have that picture in your mind of you robbing the bank. Okay. You have that one picture. And then you have the picture of you in your head saying no. And then those two don't react. So there'll be a little bit of a reaction there, or a large reaction, depending. So that's whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. It's just whether you did it.
Right.
So again, people talk about psychopaths and sociopaths being able to pass. It has nothing to do whether you agree with it or not. You liberated the money. Hey, it's not not your money, not anybody's money.
Liberated it. It's free now.
Exactly.
I'm basically Robin Hood.
I'll swear to it. That has nothing to do with it. But again, that polygraph is an investigative tool.
Sure.
Putting all the other pieces of it together, your cell phone records, your witness accounts, your video, your any number of other things, any number of other data points to put together that investigation. So again, that polygraph is one aspect of it.
Sure. Very serious question for you. Maybe the most serious of the whole podcast. In terms of coolness, I feel like the hierarchy is kind of like cops, FBI, then Secret Service. But like, what's your take on that? Who's cooler out of the three of them?
Who you're employed by.
Okay. True, fair.
Now, there are institutional rivalries across the board, but everybody, as I mentioned, everybody has a different charter. Everybody brings something else to the table.
Sure.
So, I mean, I would never say one is better than the other. We all have our good, and we all have our challenges.
Well, I didn't say better. I said cooler.
There are some very cool toys, that everybody gets to play with across the board. But I would not sit here and say one is cooler than another. I don't know, Secret Service, they do have a lot of cool toys, though.
They do. I've had my good buddy Kurt Lewis on the show before. Do you know Kurt?
Not personally, no.
No, I need to connect you guys. You guys would get along great. You guys are like in my group of like people I consider friends that could also like kill me very easily. And I don't have many of them. So I'm like, all right, I need to get the friends who could kill me very easily together. You guys would enjoy beer together. We'll go to a shooting range. It'd be awesome.
That sounds like a great time.
But yeah, he's former Secret Service. Very similar, actually. The conversations leading up to both interviews between you and me and me and him, and it just made me laugh that you guys are very similar people. Both very tall, deadly. It's like it kind of run. Do you like beer? He brews his own beer.
I've never turned down a beer.
Okay, see, you guys would get along perfect. This is great. This is awesome. So when I first started having memories, because you've known me basically my whole life. When I first started having memories, like if I think back to like our relationship, you were also a SWAT team leader at one point. How long did you do that?
I was on SWAT from 1997 until 2011, I believe. I was a SWAT team leader in Baltimore for about 5 of those years. Great time, great work.
A lot of fun.
I considered it fun.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who would not consider it fun. But again, God bless those folks. They did and do what I don't like to do, don't want to do, and vice versa. So I was blessed. We got into, we had a lot of fun, a lot of good work in and around Baltimore, and I would like to think we made a difference, kept people safe, and again, that's that really is the goal. I mean, a lot of the things that you see in the media, don't portray accurately the purpose of local police, federal. State, we're people are here for a reason, and everybody I've ever worked with, their goal is to keep people safe.
Sure.
To make sure that everybody goes home at the end of the day, and and to make a difference in the community.
Right.
I would like to think we did that.
Yeah. Without getting too deep into it, because we won't focus at all on this, but. From the law enforcement perspective, from the people that I've had on the show that I've talked to about this, there seems to be a big disconnect between, like you mentioned, the media portrayal of kind of what law enforcement's role is and what happens, and what law enforcement considers its role and what happens. Is there a way to improve this relationship going forward? Is it as simple as having better liaisons or a different way of setting that up? Is it just kind of the nature of these two groups that clash a little bit?
That is a complex question and a complex answer. Most times the interactions are positive.
Yeah.
Again, some folks they focus more on the negative aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if you had 100 calls and 99 of them were positive and one of them may not have been, chances are what's going to get highlighted is that one, as opposed to the 99 were that were very positive. Everybody, you made a difference in the community. It was positive. There was somebody who's doing something bad in the community. Law enforcement came in and they took that one bad person out of the community, and the rest of the community is there, to not be bothered by that one person. Because chances are, they were an issue in the community, but nobody had the ability to do anything about it.
Right.
And again, that's our function.
Sure. I think, too, the nature of the work, I think, of the police, the FBI, the Secret Service in some capacities, kind of butts heads there, because it is a very, very different capacity than the average person. And I think sometimes people look at that a little bit differently in terms of what's happening, and it's a different kind of solution than I think people want sometimes, but it seems to be in a lot of issues the way to solve the problem kind of most effectively. So, I mean, the past few years too have been crazy with all this stuff. But in terms of your SWAT career, what was your biggest memory of like the craziest thing that you had to do or the most dangerous situation from what you can share?
This is what the part that's what I considered fun, but you're doing dangerous things with your training, so that they are conducted safely. We had one of the craziest was a barricade situation that we had in Prince George's County. We actually went there, knocked on the gentleman's door at 6 a.m. Because we had word that he was threatening a Capitol Police officer. And what we didn't know was what he had planned to do was go to the Capitol steps, the U.S. Capitol steps, hand a tourist a note, and then start shooting. And it was going to be suicide by Capitol Police. And at the time, we did not know that. We did not have that information. We knocked on the gentleman's door. We breached the door, and then he started firing rounds at us. Bad situation, dark. Luckily, none of our folks were hurt. We backed out, had a barricade situation for about 9 hours. Worked very closely with Maryland State Police, Prince George's County Police, and then ultimately we made entry about 9 hours later, and unfortunately the gentleman fired back at us, and he was deceased.
Wow!
But it was very intense. The positive part of it was that he did not get to carry out his plan.
Sure.
He did not get to go to the state capitol or the U.S. Capitol and start firing, where innocent people would have been killed. We gave over 9 hours. We were engaged in negotiation, communication, trying to get the gentleman to come out to surrender. Harm no foul. And he chose to do something else, which was unfortunate. But luckily, no one else was hurt. No other tourists, no Capitol Police, no one else was hurt. Again, that has a lasting effect, because nobody wants to take another life.
No.
Nobody sets out. That again, contrary to to some of the narrative that's out there, no one goes out there to do that, and it gives you it causes you pause, as it should, because nobody sets out. No one set out that day, thinking that this was going to happen. We figure we're going to knock on this guy's door, we're going to arrest him, we'll bring him back, we'll talk to him, and that was it. And you can do 500 things one way, and then the 501st time, it's not that way. Again, that's why you rely on your training. And from our perspective, it was treat everybody the same, regardless of race, gender, religion, anything else. Didn't matter. You treat everybody the same.
Right.
And it makes the job a lot easier. It makes dealing with people a lot easier. It's just the relationships that I was talking to you about earlier.
Sure.
It makes that very easy, treating everybody the same, because we're not going into it with a particular bias or with a particular narrative. We're going in there. In this particular case, it was with an arrest warrant, and it was just to serve the arrest warrant so that everybody goes home safe. And we talk. That was the ultimate goal that this gentleman chose to do another way.
Sure. That's a tough situation to be in, I'm sure, especially given the time spent in terms of trying to bring that person around to a more peaceful kind of cessation of that situation. Is that typical, that the negotiation just for whatever reason doesn't end up working with somebody, or are most cases you usually can settle it through negotiation? Is it kind of a toss up?
It's a great question. I mean, 99% of the time, probably even higher. It's a very small fraction of the times that it doesn't. But you have to be prepared for all scenarios. It's a plan A, a plan B, and plan C if you can. And to prepare across the board. The negotiators, they do excellent work. Like federal, local, police, there's some awesome negotiators out there. Again, the negotiators, we're back to establishing a relationship. You're establishing a relationship and giving that person a reason to, hey, it's enough.
Right.
Let's stop and let's come on and let's talk. So again, everything we come back to, it comes back to those relationships.
Yeah,
it's just different,
seriously.
just different scenarios.
Yeah. Okay. So what I've learned this evening is that the FBI is basically just like a giant relationship hub, and they just go out and they make relationships and they solve crimes and figure things out.
In its most bare form, yes.
Which is kind of cool, because I've never thought about the FBI or any other law enforcement in that capacity. But back to what you were talking about, is this like, how often, from what you can tell me, that's my favorite phrase too to use with law enforcement, from what you can tell me, gives you a nice cop out. From what you can tell me, how often while you were with the Bureau were you having to engage in situations where you were having to breach and enter residences where you knew that your life could very well be on the line?
It's probably, again, it's increased over the years, unfortunately. But I think we probably had 52 operations my last year. Again, if you just break it down in terms of that's one a week. But an operation, could be anything from activity on a boat, to breaching a door. So the fact that we're being used, the SWAT at the time was used solely for violent offenses and or unknown offenses. You have somebody crimes against children, for instance. Those people who conducted those types of crimes, you would think that they are nonviolent. I would suggest otherwise,
right?
Because that's a crime against a child, and they're, in my opinion, the only true victims. So a whole different narrative. However, we were used a lot of times with those because you didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
That unknown is a variable that you account for. That's our job to plan, for the A, the B, and see if you can.
Right.
The goal is for everybody to be safe. Bottom line. So if you can conduct an operation so that it is orchestrated in a way to keep everybody safe, and again, breaching a door, that doesn't always happen. I mean, again, just what folks see on TV,
SWAT kicking in a door.
It doesn't. Again, that's the exception. I mean, if you can get the guy who's just leaving for work, and he comes out of his house and you approach him as he's leaving his house. I don't have to breach the door. I've made it easy. He's out in the open, and we can have basically an element of surprise. So again, keeps everybody safe. So that TV is probably one of our worst enemies because
I was gonna say
everything's aren't solved. Things aren't solved in an hour, and with all the the gunfire, and it just doesn't work that way.
Sure.
So that's a lot of it is not sexy. It is mundane. It is boring. And if you plan it correctly, it will be mundane and boring.
Yeah.
And it will be a non-event.
And I'm sure that's preferred too.
That is our goal is to have it a non-event.
Right.
Nobody, once things kick off, there's variables. That plan A is probably out the window, and you're adapting to whatever happens. So again, you're striving for the mundane.
Sure.
Again, that doesn't sound sexy, but that's That's the way it is.
It's better than crazy shootouts all the time, right?
That's TV.
Yeah.
I can't even say it too many times. TV is probably our worst enemy. And again, just backing up the polygraph, TV and movies is probably the worst.
Enemy. I have so many misconceptions that are getting shattered right now.
Meet the Parents, very funny, not accurate.
Yeah. So as a leader, even in the more mundane parts of your job when you were a SWAT team leader, you're still operating at a level, I would imagine, of pretty high stress, trying to figure out what the best move is, plans A through Z, keeping everybody safe, and then eventually, if it does escalate, operating at a very, very high level very quickly, like you said, adapting to everything happening. What was your way of dealing with that kind of a stressor in an occupation? Because most people, like, I'm in sales. Sales is stressful, but sales is not as stressful as like a 9-hour, hostage negotiation type situation potentially, right? So like how did you deal with that while you were in that position?
I coached soccer.
Really? Okay. So I helped you. You're like, okay, so I do charity work because Ben's terrible at soccer. And then I go and I do hostage negotiations.
Not at all. That was one of the things that I enjoyed. You get to immerse yourself in something that has absolutely nothing to do with what you do during the day or night, depending on how it works. You get to teach kids. Help them get better, be able to take another skill that you have and to be able to relay that to people that to help them. To coach kids at the time was definitely an outlet for me, whether you knew it or not.
I did not, but this is cool to learn now. That's awesome.
Yeah, and if you remember, when I was asking you to run laps, I was running with you.
Yes, that's true.
So that is another way. Is that exercise? Exercise is an outlet, both mentally and physically, keeps you fit. And so when things are going bad, mentally and physically, you are prepared.
Right. I think it also, and please disagree with me if you think this is different, but I think it also takes a special kind of person, not to kiss your ass at all. I think you're awful. But I think it does take a special kind of person to go into situations like that and be able to handle it, and then also be able to transition to normal life, right? Like, we have a much better understanding now in terms of specifically around soldiers, police officers, and FBI agents around PTSD and other issues like that. Were those things that you had to combat, or how frequent or prevalent was that in the Bureau in terms of people needing to seek significant mental health resources for what they were kind of encountering?
Again, great question. Mental health in law enforcement specifically is real. There is a stigma behind it. Again, it may not be politically correct, but there is a stigma behind it to seek help, and it's not often done, but very much needed. Does the PTSD exist? Absolutely. Does the bravado exist to deny it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, that's how some people deal with it. But it is not a coping mechanism. Again, in hindsight, I know that. But denying it, pushing it down, is a lot of people's way to deal with it. But it's not a good way to deal with it. It's actually, it's not coping with it. It's just denying it. So the mental health aspect of it is again, very real. I certainly don't have an answer. I know what I did, and I would not recommend it, but it worked for me.
Right.
So not good. Highly not recommended.
Could you share what that was, or would you rather not?
For me, it was denying that it exists, that it doesn't bother you. And again, 99.9% of the time you can push it down. But there's that that small fraction where it creeps back in. You know it's there.
Yeah.
And it does creep back in very strange ways. And it is not, again, in retrospect, I know it is not managing it. It's denying it. But it does, I mean, to this day, it creeps back.
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer clearly. But I mean, recognizing it now, I mean, like you mentioned that, and going back and looking at a couple of your podcasts, you're talking about it. I would highly recommend that avenue, that route.
Yeah.
So that it kind of loses some of the stigma, and that it would encourage more people, I think men specifically, to actually deal with it and not deny it.
Yeah. I think therapy is such an important part of that too. And it definitely has its stigma around it. Like you mentioned, I've tried really hard on this show to be very, very open about what I'm going through mentally. And like, I'm very open about, I see therapists and I have this going on and that going on. But I also have a really good understanding of like, that's not everyone can do that. And I know it's harder for other people. And I think that stigma that you mentioned, like, it's very interesting, right? Like, I think everybody's always recognized that the stigma was there. But I don't know that everybody's always been like super against it. They're just like, yeah, like it's just kind of, therapy's not really something that we do. We don't really talk about the feelings. We just kind of push it down. And I think like what you said, like it seems like a very masculine issue. I was watching The Sopranos for the first time a few months ago, just finished that. And probably like one of my top 2 favorite shows, like incredible. But, the dichotomy between like Tony's life and then going to therapy and like that, I think was very interesting because it like, it was still a really cool show, but half the time you have this mobster that's sitting in a therapist chair and everyone's like, yeah, like that's still cool. And it in a weird way, it's almost like that started to break that stigma down a little bit. But yeah, it is strange. I was talking to a soldier, I think 2 months ago, and we were just shooting the shit and drinking and sitting around the fire, and always known this guy to be very pretty closed up, but very like strong seeming, and like, I mean, again, he's part of like the friend group of people who could kill me very easily, and I was shocked at the things that he was telling me in terms of what he's had to deal with in his life that I just had no idea about because he doesn't share things. And I think what struck me the most was the amount of alcohol that it took both of us consuming for him to feel comfortable sharing these things that like, I'm very different, that I have no problem, seeing a therapist and going in, even one that I don't know, and just telling them like my whole life story and whatever. But I've always been a talker. This guy's not a talker. But, and I won't give like any details about this person at all other than I already have. But it was very interesting to me to talk to him about paths to seek therapy, because in his part of the military in particular, it seems like the stigma is very, very strong. Where he's been deployed or where he will be deployed in the future also seems like, from his perspective, seeking therapy or other forms of help not only is very complicated because of what he's doing, but also could damage his career. Mm-hmm. And it was a very interesting conversation because officially, if it does damage your career, I think many people know you're entitled to a lot of money and status and rank, and them making it right because they do recognize that that's very wrong. But his persistence in terms of, I really can't see anybody, me drinking and talking to people randomly when I get to that point has to be my only outlet, was like insane to me as a civilian that just like goes and sees a therapist for way too much money and then talks and figures out my issues.
Everybody has an outlet, and using that outlet to whatever extent that you need to. Your buddy, was using you, whether you realized it or not. There's I think it was Shakespeare that said, with the wine comes truth.
That's a great quote.
If you're smart, you'll do your best to manage it. Some people are able to, some people aren't. Some people, they may go run 50 miles. Some people may go coach soccer or both. Some may talk to their wives, their significant others, their pals around the campfire. But that all means something. They're all managing it in their own way. To be able to encourage that, exactly what you're doing, to talk about it, and to keep having people manage it in their own way. So at least they're doing something, as opposed to drinking alone and not talking to anybody.
And keeping it down, right.
Again, not recommended.
Yeah. Not a good solution.
No, it's not a solution. It's obviously it's what people do, but it's a downward spiral.
Yeah. I think in the case of, and we keep coming back to like a bunch of major groups here, but I think especially the FBI and general law enforcement, some of the things that they have to see on a regular basis or experience, or I'm sure that you saw, especially working with groups that were handling crimes against children. That has to take an immense toll. But I've heard that there are other coping mechanisms, essentially, other than therapy or vices, to dealing with that. But from a day-to-day perspective, I consider myself an optimist, but I still, get down from time to time. How do you deal with seeing usually the worst of humanity, sometimes on a very, very regular and personal basis, and still be able to go coach that soccer team and be able to put a smile on your face and say, all right, kids, we're going to try and beat the bumblebees today. Let's not group up too tight. And how do you handle kind of that back and forth and still have faith in humanity after seeing the worst of it?
Again, realistically, I would say to be able to compartmentalize, to be able to rely on your family. Hopefully home is an oasis for you, a secure place. Again, for some it is. To be able to again, as I mentioned, find that outlet, whatever that outlet is, to be able to use that. But again, just speaking from my own experiences, it was just compartmentalizing it and doing my best to leave it at home. Doesn't always work, but I was pretty darn good at compartmentalizing.
Yeah, that's tough, I'm sure. I have ADHD, so I'm like jack shit I am terrible at compartmentalizing, but I think that's something that again, not to get back into it, I think that's something that some in the media forget and some people generally don't think about when it comes to law enforcement, taking the sum of all the good and the bad that comes with law enforcement, understanding that at the end of the day, these are still people. They still do have feelings, yep. and most of them are not, trying to go out and cause problems or cause pain. They're trying to do the exact opposite. But you're also going through all of these things at the same time. And I think especially now, there's, a lot of feelings about law enforcement, and there's a lot of negative feelings that I think don't take that into account. Was that something that you ever experienced in your time with the Bureau, or do you think that's a more recent development?
I think the attitude and the culture has always existed, but it's a matter of again, you can't control everybody. You can only control what you do.
Right.
What I did. Again, what I did was treat everybody the same. So it didn't matter. No one could say that I was more in favor of this group versus that group versus anybody else. Everybody was the same. You treat everybody the same, and it was easy.
Right.
When a narrative is dictated, then that perception is reality. I don't really like the term, but I mean it's appropriate. If somebody is telling you, that these people are bad, these people are bad, these people are bad, and that's all you ever hear is these people are bad. Well, then after a while, people start to believe it.
Right.
And again, behind every person in law enforcement, especially, I mean, again, God bless everybody in local law enforcement, because they're doing this every day, all day, and they are somebody's mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt. They're as you mentioned, there's a human being behind every one of those people. This is the profession they have chosen. When you have something that you can't handle, what do? You call these people, who have their own set of good things they do well, things they may have challenges, but that's the person that you're calling. You're calling them when you can't handle a particular situation, or you don't want to, and you've asked this person to do it for you. Again, just a different perspective that gets lost, sometime. And that is unfortunate, because like I said, God bless local law enforcement is dealing with this every single day, all day.
Stuff.
And that's all they're ever going to do.
Right.
Is manage other people's problems in addition to their own. I mean, think about that. I mean, just from any other professional perspective.
It's not common at all. No, I mean, very, very few occupations do you have to. I mean, maybe healthcare. Do you have to worry about your own stuff and then everyone else's deal? So that's tough.
Yeah, again, that in my opinion, I mean, that's where the mental health aspect of it is. Find something that works for you.
Do something.
So whatever positive outlet that is, find it. Throw yourself into it. Whether it's going hiking, biking, you do something.
Sure.
Find it, run with it.
Sure. What was the hardest day of your career, if you had to look back on your 24 or 25 years?
That's not a good question.
Yeah, no, I'm cornering you there. We're gonna ask a better one after this, though.
We had we had one of our squad that was killed on our task force. That was a very bad day. A hell of a human being. So that was the hardest. That was the worst. And that doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
Give me a better question.
Yeah, I got a better question. What was your best day, do you think, in your career?
My best day. There's a lot of best days. That is one thing that is positive that I can say about my career. Is that I had a whole lot more good days than I had bad days. So from that aspect, that's a much better question. Being able to being able to help somebody that was not able to help themselves. In Oklahoma City, we had a kidnapping. To be able to go through the department and see the kid that you've been looking for, and to be able to take that kid and give him back to his mom.
Wow,
that's a hell of a feeling. Usually, you hear the bad, it's a recovery, not a rescue, and it's a kid. That's a bad thing. But to be able to see the positive aspects of your work, and everybody, again, it's not just mine. Mine just happened to be the guy. I just happened to be the guy who went in the door first. On that particular day, you have a whole division of people. Men, women, everybody doing their part. Everybody pulling in the same direction to find this particular child. So that is a great day when we can do that. When you can do a 9 hour interview and come out with a confession. Whether it be a positive outcome, where you find somebody alive, or you at least got a body. It's bittersweet, but you got closure for the family. You're able to give that family, that person, something they could hold on to, or their actual child back. So I was very fortunate, very blessed to have a lot of good days in the bureau, to be able to be a positive, whether it be a positive influence, or to be a very small cog in a very large machine, to help it move forward. To be able to provide assistance, again, one of thousands of people after 9/11. I mean, everybody's pulling in the same direction, but to be able to say that I helped, that I did something positive, with thousands of other people. Everybody wants to be able to say that. I was fortunate enough to be able to experience that. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Whole lot of good days.
That's good.
Much better question.
Yeah. I have to ask good and bad questions. It's the nature of a podcast. We've talked the whole show about relationships, and I think even my childish view of the bureau, which is that it's a giant relationship funhouse, I think it makes sense that that's how things are run, because I think relationships are both a really, really powerful part of humanity, but also a really, really complex part. And we talked about your relationships that you have to form with people that you are trying to help, whether that's trying to help them confess to something so that, the proper procedures can be done and there's closure and things like that, or you're saving somebody. But talk to me a little bit about the relationships that you form with people that you work with, and how important are those as you go and do these really stressful things?
The bond that you form with the people that you're doing some crazy things with, that is imperative. We had some of the worst times, with those guys, and you have some of the best times with those guys. But you're training together, you're going through a door together, you're eating lunch together, you're shooting together, and you form great relationships. We have even now, we have the guys that are retired, and you're on different text threads or emails, and you're emailing jokes about forth, or hey, remember when? And some of the some very, very dangerous things happen, some very, very funny things that happen, and you laugh about them. Years later, you laugh about them because we're all around to talk about them, and laugh about them. Yeah. Different training scenarios where things went bad, but they're, again, in retrospect, they're funny.
Funny, right?
But it's better to mess it up, training, so that you don't mess it up on the street,
exactly,
or in an actual real world scenario. But I mean, those bonds that you form are imperative. I mean, you are trusting people with your lives. One of the things that we do, and I guess this is adventure racing.
Fat Boys.
The name of our adventure racing team is Fat Boys. None of us are fat.
Could I get one of those?
No. Unless you want to do a 72-hour.
I'm a fatter boy than you. I think I deserve it, honestly.
But it's that team. We do adventure races now. That are anywhere between 24 and 72 hours. Where there's they're hiking, mountain biking, some type of water event, canoeing, rafting, whatever it might be, and they are horrible events. But they're fun because it's that camaraderie that you've established over time that right. Now you go take in these races. So you build those relationships, and again, we're back to relationships. But that's it. Those are lifelong. Again, you're not going to bond with everybody you meet, and that's That's okay too. But you learn something from everybody you meet. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good.
Sure.
But you learn something from everybody you meet. My point has always been, try and figure out what that looks like for you.
Yeah.
But you should learn something from everybody you meet.
I like that. That's good. What was your funniest mess up that you've ever done, where you totally fucked it up and everyone was laughing at you and it was like, oh shit, I can't believe I did that? Joe Bradley doesn't mess up. Which is the other thing. So.
Anybody who says they didn't mess up, they're lying to you. Probably again in training, in SWAT training, you have live fire, and you have to be very cognizant of muzzle discipline, and so you're not covering people's back. And we were actually training with SEALs down in Little Creek, and we went through a door, and it was force on force, and I went through the door, and the guy just took his gun and just popped me right in the head with it, with the butt of it, because I went in and I didn't go in quickly enough, so he had enough time to just step forward and just knock, just the butt of his gun just knocked me right in the forehead. It's nothing you can do about it. I did it wrong. I should have been faster. I should have gone to my corner. I didn't. And so again, your punishment for that, other than the humiliation, is you have to go run up the berm, with all your gear, and run up the berm, and the sandy berm, and then run back again and get back in line, and hopefully you don't do that again. But again, it was one of not my finer moments, but again, one of those sayings is you learn more from doing it wrong than you'll ever learn from doing it right.
That's true.
So I learned a valuable lesson. My ego was bruised, but
and
overall,
your forehead,
and my forehead too. But I learned. I didn't do it again. But those are learning experiences, as long as you treat them as such. Learning experiences, and
sure,
just try not to do the same thing again. But yeah, I had like an oval on my forehead for a little while. Yeah.
Again, it's so different than what most people do, right? Like if I mess up at work, I know my boss is going to chew my ass out because it's happened before. And then I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do that again. When you messed up at work, you got hit in the forehead with the butt of a rifle and then had to go run a lap and then come back. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. But again, that's what that was my normal.
Yeah.
That's what I chose. That's my choice.
That was your fun.
That was my fun. That was my normal. And it sounds crazy, but that's, I like that.
Yeah.
But again, if you ask me to do the folks who are CPAs and they're doing the forensic accounting, that I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is. But God bless, they make some great cases. And they do some phenomenal things that I could never do. So again, God bless those folks, because I could never do that. But if you ask them to do what I did, they probably look at it like, nah, I'm not doing that. Again, that's what
different things for different people.
Everybody brings something to the table.
Sure.
Everybody has something that makes them tick. And you find that, and I was fortunate. I was very fortunate to spend a career where almost every single day I wanted to go to work. Not a whole lot of people can say that.
No, that's right.
So I was fortunate. I was blessed, and I'm here, and I'm still vertical. So
there you go. That's good. Do you miss it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do very, very, very much. I enjoy what I do now, but in that corporate environment, none of those people have the same experiences that I do.
No.
And they cannot relate to me at all. And that it's a give and take, because I am learning in their environment, but they will never learn mine.
No.
But again, same thing. They are phenomenal at what they do. I work with some awesome folks. that are very good in business development and in the IT world. Awesome folks. My goal is to contribute in that, but just in a slightly different capacity.
There you go. That makes sense. Well, hey, before we stop, I just realized we never put on our headphones, so we should put on our headphones. Yours is right there. I'm just kidding around with you. We were supposed to, but I totally forgot. Hey, I loved having you on. This was awesome, and it was great to catch up with you after selling you knives and then scaring you and your wife with a snake. I think this is a good kind of rounding
balance.
out. Yeah, absolutely. If people want to find you, follow you, is that something that you want people to do in your line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned to you, the ethical polygraph prep. I have a website that's coming up probably in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. By the time this comes out, this will come out on December 21st, so it might be out.
Okay.
So we will include it in the show notes.
Okay. So it'll be iveritas.com, iveritasnow.com.
Okay.
So it's Intelligent Truth Now.
I like that. That's a good name for it.
It took a while, but that's our goal. The ethical polygraph preparation, in addition to other things like conducting tests, training, and one of the things that we do also is active shooter training.
Really? Okay.
We had one of the a restaurant that was just opening up not too far from here, and we did a presentation for them. Because again, you can't pick a place anymore that doesn't have or hasn't had an active shooter scenario. It's unfortunate, but it's happening more and more. And to be able to have the mindset, to be able to do something to help yourself
understand
out.
What to do.
Instead of being a victim, which you may or may not have the ability to get yourself. To keep yourself safe, get yourself out of the situation, or not even be in the situation to begin with. But that's one of the other things that we're offering also, and, because it is topical, unfortunately.
Yeah. Otherwise, nobody should try and find you, right? That's like it's a bad life decision.
No, not at all. Anybody who wants, I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk.
Okay, that's good to know.
I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
All right.
Guys, as always, if you want to listen to other episodes of the show, best place to go is TOTSpodcast.com. Big 3 places to listen to us are Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast. We just had some great Spotify numbers, so keep it up there. For any updates on the show, follow us on social media. Instagram and TikTok are at TOTScast. And we'll see you next time. Also, happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Cool. That's a wrap.